Hello and welcome to the 1916 Company. I'm Tim Mosso and this is Watches Tonight. This evening, Omega versus Breitling. It's time to have that conversation. Plus, we chat live and I share your viewerist chats tonight on Watches Tonight. We've got Sid over on the switcher this evening, and I want to remind you that every once in a while I do have some big news, and tonight is one of those nights. We are launching a new version of our long-running app. It is called the 1916 Company app. You can find it on the Apple App Store or Google Play. Easier ways to browse our inventory, find out what's new, get alerts when watches of interest are posted, and of course you can track the markets for the pieces that interest you long-term so you know what to pay. All of that plus entertainment in the form of videos by me and blogs by Jack Forster. So check out the 1916 Company app on Google Play and the Apple App Store. All right, let's jump straight into our topic of the evening. But first, greet some of our chatters. Okay, viewers chats number one. First, let's just make sure the stream is working because all of this is rather tentative. I want to make sure we've actually got an audience before I go any further. Okay, I'm just going to take it on faith that this thing is working. So, viewer wrist shots number one. I asked, you answered. Jeff R. from Texas. Features his steel Rolex Daytona and a four-wheeled accessory that is mostly aluminum. Tarek H. captures his Patek Philippe Nautilus annual calendar in summer form. J. Sharp enjoys a single malt with his IWC Portugueser Perpetual Calendar 42 in rose gold. That's a watch we don't see too often. Pavan B. and his Alangu und Söhne Grand Lange 1 Luminous roll with the Bavarian Motor Works. Jeff S. features a rare Ferrari and an even more exclusive platinum and enamel dial Omega Aquaterra World Time. That was a very special piece right there. You got Ferrari, you got Bentley, and you've got Omega. An 87-piece limited edition from 2017, one of my all-time favorites. Okay guys, so let's see who's in our chat box this evening. So far, I don't see anyone in the chat, which leads me to believe that this thing is not working properly. I'm just going to keep going. I said, do we have a live chat? Can you see him? Yeah. We're good to go? Okay. I don't know what's wrong with my live chat gear, but I'm going to make every attempt to interact with you guys. I just can't see who you are because my streaming software is not working. So, Omega versus Breitling. Let's get this out of the way. The Luxury 3 of the 1990s and the 2000s is an article of history, not current events. The period of rough product parity between Omega, Breitling, and Rolex ended sometime around Baselworld 2016 as the steel ceramic Daytona heralded a new era of Rolex and also a new era of Rolex demand. Today, Rolex transaction prices average roughly $14,000 globally, and that's for new watches at dealers, not the aftermarket. Add waiting lists at its dealers and pre-owned prices that rival the Holy Trinity, and you can understand why I no longer consider this brand to be a natural rival to Omega and to Breitling. At the same time, Breitling was plummeting in 2017. A watch industry recession struck from 2014 to 2017. It hit the whole industry, but Breitling combined that chance misfortune with the self-inflicted wounds of overproduction, huge watches that very few people could wear, and a distinct lack of innovation. If anything, the one-time Rolex rival seemed on track to plummet down to the market stratum of Tag Heuer, Tudor, and Longines, and it really did feel like Breitling was heading there in 2017. Omega arguably is Swatch Group's strongest brand, but its mainstream luxury market standing remains roughly where it was a quarter century ago, above Tag but below Rolex. Products have improved over time and the investment in the product has been quite consistent, but aside from occasional hits like the Silver Snoopy 2, Silver Snoopy 3, and the Dark Side of the Moon Apollo 8, Omega tends to be a brand like Lexus. Consistent, acknowledged quality, but not much brand buzz day to day. Breitling, on the other hand, since 2017, has been on a roller coaster. From the depths of despair in early 2017 to something like a nearly complete comeback as of 2024, Breitling is back in the buzz business. While I suspect production volume at Breitling outstrips sales by some amount and discounts probably play a role in there, there's no doubt that much of the Breitling comeback is a real thing driven by self-evidently improved watches. So is an upwardly mobile Breitling a legitimate Omega rival? That's the question we will answer tonight. But first, viewer wrist shots number 2. And before I jump in, let me see. Okay, I can see that people are in fact watching this, but for some reason I cannot see who they are. I'm going to refresh my live stream again and see if I can get that chat box. I can't, guys. I know you're there. Stay with me. Help me get up to like 200 concurrent viewers, and hopefully this thing will work out in the end. So Jens F. celebrates summer with his 50th birthday present, the Lange und Söhne, Lange 1 time zone, a travel watch par excellence. Kevin C. has the watch of the night with his Mont Blanc Minerva 1858 in white gold. Mark S. graces us with a super scarce first generation Vacheron Overseas Quartz chronometer. Rafat K. and his Grand Seiko SBGJ 249 Shosho pay their respects to Mount Fuji. Michael R. shares an Omega stalwart, the Diver 300 meter with white ceramic dial. Send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your pieces on these pixels. Okay, let me try something a little bit different right here. I'm gonna open up the live stream and try to watch it on YouTube and see if I can see your comments. And incredibly, I still can't see your comments. I can see me, but I cannot see you. All right. So guys, just stay with me and we will have a good time. Unfortunately, I will not be able to answer questions or riff off of your comments because I just can't see them. So, Omega versus Breitling, icon versus icon. This is the main event. Or if you are British, this is the Ashes. It is the big marquee matchup. So, Mido, Baume Mercier, Glasuta Original, Piaget. What do they have in common? All of these are fairly well-known brands that don't really have an icon. And some lines, for example with Piaget, like the Altiplano or the Polo, or the Clifton with Baume & Mercier, might have better recognition than their other model lines, but there's nothing here that can be called the brand's Royal Oak or Reverso. They don't really reach that point. All of which is to say, Omega and Breitling maintain serious icons with longevity and instant recognition, even to casual watch fans. Heck, there are people in the general population who don't know watches, but they know the Moonwatch and they know the Breitling Navitimer. So let's compare, starting with the Omega Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch. Okay, so what hasn't been said about the Moonwatch? There's one in the Smithsonian, and for good reason. Today, it remains one of the very few mechanical watches globally that's still in service with government entities on a basis other than some sort of marketing and branding deal. This is hardware that still saves lives, or is expected to do so. Its dial would be instantly recognizable to crew members of the space race era craft of the 1960s, and I can guarantee you that there's at least one in orbit with an astronaut right now. It's still used because its durability against heat, cold, shock, and radiation makes it NASA's choice for space travel and extravehicular activity, which is to say spacewalks, as tough as it gets, where it's both cold and frying hot at the same time. At 42 millimeters in diameter with a thermoplastic crystal, it's got that lovely bubble aesthetic, its appearance hasn't changed meaningful. Do we have that crystal, Sid? There we go. Its appearance hasn't changed meaningfully since about 1964. Omega maintains the clean and classic look by banishing the usual text temper tantrum to the caseback, where you can see it is professional, coaxial, master chronometer, the first whatever. The good thing is the dial side doesn't include any of this, and in good taste. Internally, the watch got its biggest mechanical overhaul since 1968 versus, well, via 2021's caliber 3861, a coaxial master chronometer evolution of the ancient Lemania 1873 Bausch. Now, there's not much of the Lemania left in there. Between stop seconds, a coaxial escapement, a free-sprung regulator, a silicon hairspring, this is a highly modified version of the breed, but it's still a cam lateral clutch manual wind chrono, and it still flies. All of which is to say there's still enough here that this is part of the lineage. Here's the other thing. At $7,000, the Speedmaster Moonwatch is a reasonable buy, and that's with a bracelet, with a solid caseback. Now, $8,000 still on a bracelet gets you the sapphire sandwich with a display caseback. And your $8,000, do we have the picture of the caseback, Sid? Okay, well, you would see the movement, which looks like that, if the caseback were there. Okay, nice recovery. So, $8,000 full bracelet display caseback, all of which is to say this is a fair price. Let's see how many folks are watching. Guys, help me get up to 200. We've got a bit of a slow start to this episode, and I think it's all down to the fact that we can't really interact, but we can still have a good time. So, compared to the Speedmaster Moonwatch, this is where we get into the versus element of tonight's show. The Navitimer is more of an icon in the Jaeger-LeCoultre Reverso sense. It's more of a long-running model family without a single definitive reference to anchor it, which is to sort of say there's no center of gravity to the Navitimer collection. There have been so many of them, and there are so many of them, that once you've got that calculator bezel, and I would say at bare minimum a chronograph, you've got a Navitimer that could basically be tailored to suit what you think a Navitimer should be. Reversos come in all sorts of forms: tourbillon, minute repeater, dual time, calendars, and Navitimers are the same way. However, if we're looking for a model that comes as close as possible to the 1950s original, then the aptly named Navitimer Reference 806 1959 re-edition is the one. As the name implies, this was a limited edition from 2019, made in 1,959 pieces, all in stainless steel. It featured many authentic vintage details, including a small beaded bezel, monotone counters, plexiglass crystal with manual wind movement, no date dial, AOPA shield and wings, and 41mm diameter in stainless steel. Now the model remains cataloged by Breitling, thank you so much. We just had a big upgrade in-house. Now I can finally see your comments. But let me say, the model remains cataloged by Breitling with a $9,500 retail price. So in theory, you can still get this watch. Its caliber B09 is a 70-hour manual winder with a column wheel, vertical clutch, and a COSC chronometer certification. So how does this Navitimer, which comes as close to a core model as can be, compare to the Moonwatch? Well, it's a little bit difficult because this Navitimer has no bracelet, it costs more money, it has less water resistance at 30 versus 50, it has a greater power reserve at 70 versus 50, solid caseback versus optional display caseback, vertical clutch and column wheel chronograph versus cam and lateral, plus the Navitimer here has greater exclusivity and the always controversial Fotina. So, which one do I like better? I actually like the Navitimer better. Now, I'm not a pilot's watch genre kind of guy, but I do like the calculator bezel, which I find useful, fun, and different. And I think this is a watch that's scarce enough that you're not going to see one on every other wrist at Watches and Wonders. So there's an element of exclusivity here, and I really dig the 50s Navitimer aesthetic without any kind of tone-on-tone registers or a large beaded bezel. So this really sings to me. And I love manual wind adaptations of the Breitling B01. So between the plexi and all those other features, this is the one I would own. And here's the thing, it wears a lot smaller than the Moonwatch. So at least from where I stand, provided the price premium doesn't hurt you in the wallet, Advantage Navitimer. So guys, I now have a second computer courtesy of Garrett in our control cab, who's given me the ability to see what you guys are saying. Thomas Burnett, love this 806 1959 reissue of the Navitimer. And Big Tony saying, calculate your tips, it's easier than you think. Mark S saying, Breitling dial gives me a headache. You should see the calendar versions. All right. Steve 1010 saying, greetings Tim, the Omega Ed White 321 is for me. And we've got Elliot T saying, Tim back in play with the ad libs. You better believe it. Okay, Slow Boy Fuel Pump, Nate Meyer, Scott Smith, all you guys joining in. I seriously appreciate your patronage of the show. Okay, now here's the other thing. Since the 806 1959 isn't a regular offering, the closest thing to routine production core Navitimer is going to be like your Navitimer B01 chronograph 41. So this is something you can buy all the time in unlimited quantity at any Breitling store. It's not going to be in short supply. It's a very different Navitimer than the 1959 re-edition. For one, it has a display case back, and for two, it has an automatic winding movement. That's the B01. There is a date on the dial, which you can see hidden in the register at 6 o'clock. And the tone-on-tone registers and a bezel with a modern knurling profile give it a much more contemporary look. A sapphire crystal rather than a plexi caps the front and rear of the watch, and its $9,550 price surprisingly surpasses even the limited edition 1959, which really took me aback. I didn't expect that. So, in the end, I would say the Speedmaster Moonwatch's advantages over either Navitimer, automatic or manual, amount to authenticity. And the NASA link is a to-this-day reality. Like I said, those astronauts stranded in orbit right now, I'll bet each one of them is wearing this watch, and I wish them the best. But I'll also say that price is a factor when you spring for a watch that costs either $7,000 or $8,000 versus $9,500 plus. So the Omega really has an advantage right there. And for $9,550, remember, the Navitimer doesn't even give you a bracelet. That's a watch on a strap. The 1959 is cool, but you may not be able to find one new as of 2024, whereas this is available everywhere all the time. The Omega includes the master chronometer certification, the silicone hairspring, the coaxial escape, and a free-sprung regulator, which is to say, though the Lemania-based is ancient, this movement is bleeding-edge current in its technology and specs. So until something like the 1959 becomes a current and constant and full-time Navitimer offering, the core Moonwatch remains a better buy and a stronger icon than any Navitimer on sale as of the summer of 2024. Let's see what's going on in our box. We're off to a bit of a slow show tonight, but we've got 226 live. Let's see if we can get that up to 300 before the end. You know how much I appreciate those high concurrent viewers, and they really do make a big difference. Last week's show was a bomb and no one watched live, which meant no one watched streaming. That's always the way it works. So if you guys can stick with me, even if you mute it and keep it live, that helps me a whole lot. Rahul K saying, given that you can get a Breitling Datura for $10K, a Moonwatch doesn't make sense. Soma R, better late than never. Good evening. Good to see you, my man. Krishna M, hi. Love to catch you live. It's my first time. Thank you for joining in. We certainly appreciate your company. Moto Gunner, Thomas Burnett, Stephen Eichhorn saying hello from Detroit. Pocket Watch Time saying I'd buy a Zin Navi. That's right. What is that, the 903 they call that? Is that what they call the Zin Navitimer? James Hess in the box, and Andrew T. Okay, so guys, continuing with our regularly scheduled program, now that I have two computers, one streaming with the live chat, let's go with Omega versus Breitling, but first, viewer wrist shots number 3. Kevin M and his Parmigiani Tondograph annual calendar chrono wait for action on a slow night in the emergency room. Alex W from Worcester, UK forwards his Mulla Glasuta search and rescue with watches tonight, which I always appreciate. Abdul R of Germany commemorates the moment with his vintage Rolex Datejust two-tone 1601. Benjamin H and his Zenith Chronomaster Sport match dial to bezel to strap colors to ink, which I love to see. I think that might be the pure wrist shot of the night. Steve S stages his Seiko Prospects by the harbor for a lovely atmospheric shot. Moody blues indeed. Moody shot, blue dial. Guys, send your wrist shot to mondaymailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your watch on this box. By the way, I don't know. They stole my Watch You Want commemorative vintage cap from the scenery behind, but I'll bring that on before the end of the show. It was supposed to be right behind me. Omega versus Breitling. Now let's talk about the main event, because both of them are famous for making pilots' watches or aerospace watches, but dive watches are the meat of the market for the industry as a whole, and that's where we're going right now with dive watches. So, where are we? Well, despite the previous discussion of iconic aerospace chronographs from Omega and Breitling, the reality is that dive watches rule this market, and you can thank the Rolex Submariner for that. At Breitling, the Superocean heritage has even amounted to the brand's best-selling model line for over a decade, which is to say it actually outsells the Avengers and the Chronomats and the Navitimers, all the pilot watches that take a backseat to the Superocean heritage. And both brands offer a huge range of divers that span several model lines, but as with the pilot's chronographs, there are models that sit closer to the core of the collection than others. So at Omega, the Seamaster Diver 300 meter is king. That's our thumbnail watch for the night. Guys, we're up to about 250. Stay with me here. Let's hit 300. So we're technically below the Planet Oceans and the Ploprofs in the hierarchy of Seamasters. The D300 remains the image leader and the longest running design due to James Bond. This is the most famous modern Omega dive watch. Last redesigned for 2018, the 42mm steel diver is packed with features and functions. And you can see some of them right there. Almost everyone associates this watch with the James Bond of the Pierce Brosnan era, which may explain why this is the only Seamaster design to endure for over 30 years, nearly 3 times as long as anything that came before it in the Seamaster catalog. Specific enduring cues include the skeleton hands, the blue dial with the wave pattern, the helium escape valve, and the shallow knurled bezel that hark back to the GoldenEye era when it looked like Brosnan was on his way to becoming the next Sean Connery. Well, Brosnan's last 3 turns as 007 weren't as successful, but the watch got better with every generation. So the current SMP Diver 300 meter exhibits vault-like solidity in its bezel, bracelet, and clasp. On the wrist, this feels like a $10,000 watch. About that clasp, the last has sliding adjustment, so you can see there is a push-button sliding adjustment with about 10.7 millimeters of incremental, 9.7 millimeters of incremental sliding adjustability, but there's also a fold-out dive extension, which gives you a huge range of adjustment inside a very thick gauge clasp that, like the watch, feels like $1 million. Caliber 8800 affords a 55-hour power reserve, which isn't a headlining feature, but there is near immunity to magnetism, which does rock, master chronometer certification, and the still exotic George Daniels coaxial movement. So helium escape valve technology is present for the unlikely saturation dive use case. And of course, at 300 meters, this is a very solid bet for all of your diving needs. At $5,900 with a full bracelet, the Seamaster is really tough to beat for value, and you can get them for even less pre-owned. There's no reason to get this watch on a strap. You're only saving a few $100. Get it on the bracelet. Always get it on the bracelet. Let's see what's going on in the chat box right here. As we approach 260 concurrent viewers, we've got Pocket Watch Time, Mason 1, Junior Johnson, CEK Watch Chris. We got Good Evening Gents from Germany, and I appreciate that, CEK. We've got David Stevens saying Seamaster all day, and Keystar G60, does the Zen Hunter watch justify its 16mm thickness? I would say yes. I like that watch. But we're talking about divers, and now we're talking about Breitling's Superocean Heritage 42, the natural rival to Omega's core Seamaster Diver 300 meter. So launched in 2017, the second generation Superocean Heritage gained serious firepower in the form of a Tudor MT5612 movement similar to that found in the Pelagos. The mesh bracelet of the Heritage 42 is part of this watch's vintage cosplay and looks fantastic with straight bars at the lugs. Out back, the cover is solid, primarily because Breitling understands what Tudor doesn't appear to, which is that the MT5612 is an ugly movement. And at $5,700, Breitling makes a compelling pitch to Omega cross shoppers. And while this isn't one of Breitling's in-house calibers, Breitling does treat it as such and offers the full 5-year warranty that it gives to its manufacturer movements, and that brings it into parity with the Omega. So how does this Superocean Heritage 42 with Tudor power compare to the Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter? Well, first, it's going to be a big win for Omega on the clasp. It is a trigger release with 2 internal extension systems. It looks and works and feels like a better system and a more expensive system and a more durable system than what you get on the Breitling, because Breitling's mesh bracelet looks great, but the stamped clasp with clamshell lock and drilled anchor slots is vintage in the bad sense of the word. It feels old and outmoded, and yes, it feels like money was saved here. For power reserve, though, Breitling has a bit of an advantage. A 15-hour advantage over the Omega's 55 hours, but Omega strikes back with a helium escape valve and a 100-meter diving depth advantage over the Superocean Heritage and its 200 meters. Regarding bezels, I would say Omega's is better loomed, but the Breitling is captive constructed, which means it's sturdier and it won't snap off as easily. And it's far easier to grip. Whereas with the Omega, if there's even a little bit of water on your hand or that bezel, you can't move it. So on that front, bezel advantage, Breitling. Now, also important, $200 isn't chump change, so Breitling has a small pricing edge. That said, both of these watches will likely sell with some kind of a discount, even out of the authorized dealer. So your negotiating skills will determine where the final price resides and where the ball stops rolling, so to speak. So I do think you could, in the real world, wind up getting the Omega for less than the Breitling, or vice versa. It's too close to call. All of the foregoing notwithstanding, remember that the Breitling, due to the way its lugs are shaped, is a bigger 42 than the Omega's 42. This is down to secondary dimensions and the shape of the watches. Things like lug to lug and the span of the lugs. So keep that in mind if fit comes first for you. Overall, this comparison is likely a win for the Omega, but the comparison is close enough that a person could very well choose the Breitling on a style basis and really forego no pleasure of ownership or use in the process. Okay, let's see what you guys are saying right here. Mark S saying, Mark S, I'm losing what you guys are saying here, but someone is saying we think YouTube content is cheap to produce, but it's not. I can tell you it takes most of my day to prep this show. John D asking, Tim, what movements are on the wall behind you? Well, we've got one that's Romain Gauthier, we've got one that I believe is Grubel 4C, and then we've got one more that I'm pretty sure is Vacheron. Yep, that's what we got up there. Okay, so let's see what you guys are saying in the chat box. Danny Rubin, make sure you try the Milanese before you buy, doesn't fit all wrists. Very good point. Elliot T saying Pierce Brosnan wore a Seamaster 300, can't knock James Bond. And we have Raul K saying Calib de Cartier Diver is the elite option. I'd actually prefer that, the blue version on the rubber strap, over either of the watches I just showed you. What else is going on in the box? Benjamin L saying first time catching the show live, and you know I appreciate that. Elliot T, white gold Daytona blue or white gold Date 840 olive. I would probably go with the white gold Date 840 olive. I like calendars, and I like that green dial in a white gold case. We got Thomas B saying Moto Gunner, the Planet Ocean is my favorite Omega diver. Mark S saying Tim, a few weeks ago in a Chopik Antarctique interview, you said it was your favorite integrated bracelet watch. Will you please elaborate, justify? No, we are short on time today for that sort of elaboration, which is why I have a long form review on Watchbox Reviews that includes that very watch. Okay, so now what if we look beyond the bedrock divers and we compare each of Omega and Breitling's ultimate dive watches? Well, Breitling recently raised its dive watch game with the Superocean 46 Super Diver, a 46mm titanium giant with a camouflage dial, or you could get it in blue, camouflage, and a 1,000-meter dive rating. It has a sliding lock on the 9 o'clock side, so it's got a quirky locking system, so you can lock and unlock the bezel as needed. It's not a conventional unidirectional turner. So it also has lume that is absolutely nuclear, which you can see well right here, and there's no disputing the time once the ambient light fades. Omega counters with the Seamaster Planet Ocean Ultra Deep 6,000 meters. At 45.5 millimeters, it is just as large as the Breitling, but only steel is offered if you want a full bracelet. You can get it with loop lugs and titanium, but that's only on a strap. Realistically, the Omega wins every comparison, from clasp features to rated depth to bezel lume, which is all the way around, not just the pearl, to movement sophistication, where Omega has it all over the Breitling. The Omega has a coaxial master chronometer caliber, and the Breitling has an ETA 2892A2. But at $12,700, the Omega is priced to match its specs. If the Breitling's going to win this comparison, it'll need to do so on something of a curve, and it does. The retail price of the Breitling is $6,970, so it undercuts this Omega by so much that the Superocean's more than adequate 1,000-meter real-world depth rating and lighter titanium construction might carry the day if you are cross-shopping these. It leaves enough money to go and buy another watch altogether. So keep that factor in mind. Sometimes two watches will beat one. All right, let's see what you guys are saying in the chat box. Scott Smith, the Summer Blue Ultra Deep is sweet. Have not seen one in person yet. Very tempting. It is a very cool watch. I've seen one Summer Blue watch in person, and it was definitely worth going out of your way to find one. Randy SN, I don't understand why people buy a Breitling, but I don't get the Kardashians or yellow cars, so to each their own. And Raoul K saying Ultra Deep in Summer Blue is a fun piece with the Easter egg. We got Watchdog Podcast saying love the new BSO. Funky design and bezel action is amazing. SMP bezel action is among the worst at any price, in my opinion. Mark S. asking, Tim, what happened to Market Wrap? We didn't get a lot of views, so we don't have it. What else is going on here? Elliot T. Potentially Tim knows all. Daytona White Gold Blue has better value hold long term. I don't know all or even most. I'm a student. I learn something new every day. And with Market Wrap, there's also Mike's time. He doesn't have a whole lot of it. So it's a combination of challenging viewership equation and also Mike not having a lot of time outside of running the sales department, which is, after all, what pays for these pixels right here. And Mr. Personality, shout out to Tim. I appreciate that very much, guys. Okay, Omega versus Breitling, exotic tourbillon watches. Omega and Breitling are different from Rolex because of the status, stature, and average transaction prices that I discussed in the preamble to this program. That said, the former two offer a type of watchmaking that is alien to the Rolex universe. While six-figure Rolex watches do exist, they reach that price point by virtue of precious metal, set stones, and rarity. In contrast, both Omega and Breitling offer highly controversial and highly complicated watches whose exotic designs and engineering warrant stratospheric prices. That's where the controversy comes in from these brands. This puts the erstwhile Luxury 2 in league with operations like MB&F, Jaeger-LeCoultre, or even Patek Philippe. While nobody could mistake Omega and Breitling for anything but mass-market brands, their minority interest in haute horlogerie, Tourbillon, opens a niche basis for comparing them, and we're going to do that. Omega has long occupied the tourbillon space with its central tourbillon, a 1994 release later subsumed by the DeVille model line. However, the 2020 DeVille tourbillon represented a Huge change, the biggest change in this series since that first model in '94. Aside from the imposing 43mm canopus white gold case, this watch includes a manual wind caliber that replaces the previous rotor winding automatic. Like FP Journe, the movement is made of solid 18-karat rose gold, so it's full precious metal on the bridges and plates. Finish is Holy Trinity level and then some, because these sharp bevel creases likely wouldn't appear on an AP even at the $250,000 price point of this Omega. All of these watches are made in a special Omega studio where traditional hand finishing, assembly, regulation, and one man, one watch fabrication takes place. Twin barrels now supply a superb 3 days of power reserve. There's a case-back power reserve indicator, which makes perfect sense on a now manual wind watch. And this DeVille still boasts a flying tourbillon with coaxial escapement. Take a look at that coaxial escapement on a flying tourbillon. With no excuses asked and none given, it passes the full master chronometer test complete with shocks and magnetic application. This is a real-world tourbillon. Breitling takes a vastly different approach to its premier B21 tourbillon. Originally launched in 2021 as the final leg of Breitling's 20-year association with Bentley, the B21 tourbillon offers greater value and complication than the truly autologerie Omega. In precious metal, the 42mm B21 is a chronograph tourbillon, an elite class of compound complication generally associated with Patek Philippe. However, Breitling economized and imported expertise by engaging La Joux-Perret to integrate an automatic winding column wheel chronograph and a tourbillon carriage. While not hyper-exotic, the result is a friendly and usable automatic tourbillon chrono with COSC certification and 100-meter water resistance. The Premier, as seen here, is even loomed to a useful extent. At $63,000, we're looking at 1/3 the price of the Omega for a watch that offers a bunch of advantages, really 1/4 the price of the Omega right here. If we don't talk about the platinum model and we stick with the gold, yeah, 1/4 the price of the Omega. So how do they compare? Well, the Omega is true autologerie. It is a watch that is a Grubel 4C fighter from people who brought you the Speedmaster. Unlikely, but welcome. Hand-built and finished to match, this isn't a watch you compare to any Breitling or Rolex. Quality, rarity, and long-term serviceability are assured. Breitling likely realizes that its brand isn't at a level that can justify a $250,000 watch of any kind right now, yet. And the 2005 Mulliner tourbillon, which was made by Audemars Piguet, was stratospherically priced, ugly, and controversial for its size. Everything about this watch was questionable. So the Premier sticks to attractive design of the core Premier collection and the reasonable size of the 42mm Premier, keeps the price high but attainable, and sells as a relative value for its complication type. Finish is nowhere near this Omega, but again, for a quarter of the price, it doesn't need to be. If Breitling were to release a steel or titanium version of this watch, it could even be a relative bestseller for its genre. Viewer wrist shots number 4. Gary is on standby in the car, waiting for his wife with a Rolex Explorer 2 Polar on a custom-cut kudu strap. Eric N. of North Carolina prepares for VA duty with scrubs and IWC's Pilot's Watch chronograph. Mark D. from Bristol, UK has the car of the night with a 1970 Camaro 454 4-speed SSRS and IWC Big Pilot's Watch. Kunal M. is in the Tokyo Fender store with 70th anniversary Stratocaster and IWC Pilot's Watch Mark 18. Michael W. of Germany takes us home with high-performance Kia EV6 GT and Bulova Accutron Space View. Guys, send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to my crew for really rolling with it tonight. And thanks to Sid for being limber on the switcher. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.